Okay, so I've got the existing model fairly well developed, and I just want to give you an idea about some of the different options you have using Revit as a modelling program, and mainly look at the mass modelling tool, which is one that you've probably seen a little bit but maybe haven't used very much or haven't got into all the options that it has. So you've got two options to create a mass model. On the main menu you can go to New and then choose Conceptual Mass. Yeah. And then it'll just give you one template you can choose, which is Metric Mass. And then you can make the mass model in a separate family file. And you usually begin with a set of model lines. So I've just clicked there on the model button, and then you can see it gives you a draw panel that has a lot of the same options you get with most of the drawing tools in Revit, but a few that you might not have seen before, like points and 3D splines. But I'm going to start with just straight lines. And notice as well you've got the option to either draw on a face or draw on the work plane, which is one that people often miss. I'm going to leave it on that default option, which is draw on face, but often you'll change that to the other one, draw on work plane. And so I'm just going to begin with a simple shape, polygon, and then you'll notice straight away if you've mostly done solid modelling with Revit, that if you select any of those lines, that it'll highlight, or often anyway, it'll highlight a group of them. And that's because it joins them together automatically, and when they're joined, it selects the whole group as a shape. If you want to select just one segment, you simply need to click again on the segment you want, and then you can move that separately. So notice also the dimension that's there. It's really big because massing really is set up to work at a large scale, and so I'm going to change that to a smaller dimension, 10,000, and make something a bit just not so big. So it's still there, selecting the whole group of objects as one shape. And so I'll just draw a few more model lines to give you an idea what options you have. And so I've drawn a single line there, and I'll do... so that's not a plane. I'll just do a selection there and set, actually using that plane. There we go. So I've just used the set option, if you missed that, to choose this plane that's already been set up for me. And that way I can do shapes that are perpendicular to the ground. So that's another option you have with this type of modelling that you don't have normally. And so then I can view that from above, and I'm just going to copy using the normal copy tool those shape, or that set of lines, and also the reference plane to the left. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a moment. Just want to give you a few examples of different types of modelling. So I'm just going to make these a little bit different to each other. Just using the arrow. Alright, so essentially what I've got there is a shape that's on the ground, and I might, make that a bit bigger. So if I select that, then the Create Form button's going to come up, and that's your main modelling tool. So like I was saying, you begin with model lines, and then you have the Create Form tool, which turns things into solid objects, or 3D objects. It is very similar, exactly, yeah. So it's a bit like the Push-Pull tool when you use it with a single shape. If you select the single line, you can extrude it, which is something you normally can't do with Revit. with solids, but you can with massing. But I'll undo that and go back to the two, and if I select those two together and then use create form, it'll do a revolve. So you might have been wondering why you don't have all the modelling tools that you'd normally have, like extrude and revolve and so on, and it's because you really don't need them. You can do everything with create form. So if I select this series of shapes over here, just using control, and then create form, then it's going to do something similar to a blend, but notice it's blended all four shapes. So ordinarily with Revit, the limitation with a blend is that you can only blend two shapes. So I could select those two, and that's what you get with a blend. And that's as far as you can go with ordinary solid modelling in Revit. But with massing, again, you can take it a lot further because you can blend as many shapes as you like together, and all just using that create form tool. So then taking it a little bit further, you can even have those shapes at different angles. So one of those planes could be rotated, or any of them could be rotated, and the blend is still going to work. You can even draw a path and it'll follow the path. So already you're getting much more complex geometry than you could ordinarily with solid modelling. Well, I'll go back to this first one and again use create form. So that's just like a simple extrusion, but then you'll see you have different sub-objects. So each corner will come up as a separate vertex, and one little shortcut I can show you there is with the space bar you can switch between X, Y, Z axes, and you can tell it's X, Y, Z because it goes red, green and blue. So red is X, green is Y and blue is yellow. And then the other toggle, or pressing space again, gives you axes that are in line with the edges of the object. And then you can use any of those arrows to stretch in any direction. So you might have wondered how to create triangular shapes or forms that slope in different directions using solid modelling, and the answer is often you can't, or they're very difficult. But again, with massing you can. So I'll delete this subject. Alright, so I've got there kind of in an interesting form, but we can go further, and so now I'm just going to select any part of it. It doesn't matter which part. You can either select an edge or one of the faces, or even using tab the whole element. And once you've selected the form, you'll get the option to go into X-ray mode, which is a common option that you use with massing to be able to see those points more clearly. And now just to show you maybe some of the other common options, I can again select an edge, and here you can see we've got options to add edges, add profiles, and dissolve, which is going to basically remove the surfaces and just leave the wireframe. Now I'm going to use add profile and add in an extra profile there in the middle. So then something interesting happens. These points, when you drag them, give you a curve following along the edge that is projected from that profile. So again, all these things are, like I said, difficult if not totally impossible with the regular modelling tools in Revit. Difficult to build as well, but it's more and more possible these days with CAD/CAM and different approaches. So you know, all the Frank Gehry and other deconstructivist stuff you'll see out there, they use modelling tools similar to this. So that again, if I go and select any of those forms, I can turn X-ray off, and then can keep making further forms. So I might want an opening through this, and so using create form, but this time going to the sub option there and choosing void form. Oh, I thought that was intersecting. I'll just check that above. Okay, so I'll just drag that over, and so to make that less high, I'm just going to use tab to bring up the top surface there, and then I can stretch that using the gizmo there. And that gizmo, you'll see, is common to a lot of Autodesk programs. So in a little while, when I show you 3ds Max, you'll see it in there as well. And so then I can use cut, because it's not automatically join those two objects. So with the cut tool, you can choose the solid and the void and combine them. And so you can combine as many different things as you like with this type of modelling as you can with regular solid modelling. And so then finally, you need to bring that into a project to be able to use it. So I'm just going to do a save as. So thought I had a folder for this, but DC, yes I do. So we'll just call it mass example. Okay, so I'm going to use load into project, and it'll come into my project just like any other family. So it's going to place that in the courtyard area. Right, so again, just to show you what massing is really intended for, it's not really meant as a detailed modelling tool. So if you're thinking about making complex furniture and other things like that, it's probably not the tool to use. And unfortunately, Revit isn't either. So you can do some things with Revit. Fairly standard geometry is not a problem. But if you need to make complex geometry, neither of those programs are really the right one. You'd probably want to use either AutoCAD if you want to do accurate 3D modelling, and you can model virtually anything that's buildable using AutoCAD. Or the other option is a full-blown 3D package like 3ds Max, which again you can use to model anything.
Yeah, I tried to use it before for a project where I was using like geometric on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can use massing for that, definitely.
It was really hard.
It takes a bit of getting used to. Yeah. Yeah. But once you get with those facets, I'm going to probably do an example actually of that with in-place massing in a second, and it works.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll show you that. And
I got there in the end.
Yeah. I know. It's, yeah. Yeah, it's a bit fiddly. Yeah. Max will do a better job, but yeah, you can do it. So so here, this object is obviously visible, but if you go to the Massing and Site tab, you'll see there's an option there, which is really a toggle button. So that toggles the massing on and off. And the reason you have the option to turn it off is because it's not really meant for physical objects. It's meant to be there for things like envelopes and massing studies, and then you clad it with the physical objects like floors or walls or roofs, which are the things you see in the end. And so so that could be a building or part of a building, and it's tall enough to be a building. So almost. So I could make it have some stories if I just go back to the family once I select it, edit family. Yeah, so you've got to that's right. You've got to be aware of that toggle to make it visible again. So I'm just going to make this taller. Unfortunately, my void has gone with it, so I'll undo that and use Tab and make sure I'm getting the right surface there. And that's doing it again. That's okay. I'll just bring the void down. So another option I should have just mentioned is to go into an elevation and establish some heights there, just using reference planes. So it's a bit tricky in a family like this. A reference is a reference line, and a plane is a reference plane. So a reference line is actually a more complex version of a reference plane. So avoid them at first and just use planes, which are reference planes. So I'm just going to draw in a plane here at say 4,000, and then another one to indicate what might be the next story. So I've got there easily enough room for 2 stories. So I'll load it back into the project and then overwrite that version. So that's how you make changes. And now I'm going to start thinking about how I can turn that into something that's built. So with the mass selected, you get the option to add in mass floors. So I can then use any of the levels in this project to create floors within this. So I'll use building B is higher. Oh no, sorry, is it, yeah, building B is higher, yep. And level 1 of building B again. There we go, so you can see then it's added in these plates. So now, back on the Massing and Site tab, you can see there's the option to create floors. So I can pick those planes and then use the create floor option, and it turns them into things that have a thickness. Also on the Massing and Site tab, you can use any of those model by face tools, like the wall option. So then I'm going to change it to finish face interior, and I might go for a slightly thinner wall, generic 200, and I can just choose any of the surfaces there, and it then will turn them into wall surfaces. So I don't want that one, I want that to be a roof. So you don't need to use all of it. Sometimes you might just make a mass to get 1 or 2 surfaces and create some unusual wall or something like that. But here I will do a complete form.
Sorry, can you just have to line this up with where you actually want, when you just say create the walls, where you are a different wall?
Yep.
To line up with where you actually want it then?
You should, yeah, it's best to, because then if you change the mass, you can update the walls that way. So if you want to move it, if you want to move the walls, move the whole mass rather than trying to move the walls. And so then, so here the last thing I'll just put on is a roof. Roofs I've always found a bit tricky because when you make a roof, it always seems to put it within the surface. There's no option to take it above. So the only way I've found to do that is to use an offset. So you can go into properties and make it the same as the roof thickness. So if we change that to a, say, 400mm roof, then I can make the offset there 400 and bring that up. And then you could even look at stretching that out. So roofs can be a bit awkward with massing. I don't think they really intended it to be used all that much. So sometimes a better option than putting a roof on is just to have a wall on that top surface, which will join much more cleanly. And then another option as well to think about is the curtain system. So I'll just get rid of one of these walls, and then with the curtain system, select that panel, and you can get these automatic, fairly detailed framing systems. So I'll just get that. Exactly. That's right. That's right, exactly, and that's the next thing I was just going to go through. So, so here I can put in mullions, just like you can with a normal curtain wall. So I'm just going to set the same mullion for all those different options. And then because they're just walls as far as Revit's concerned, it'll still let you place things like doors and windows into those. So any door will go in even if it doesn't work with the geometry, it'll still let you place it. So in plan, if I go to the right level, there we are, you'll see those work just like they would normally. And so windows as well, of course, so I'll just select the window. Not that that window works too well in there, but I might just use a fixed one. So you've got to check that the slope works. You can see there those windows then starting to have issues because they're projecting out from that surface. But, well, in this case you'd have to make a different window family if you wanted to place a window there, but you'd probably think about where the windows would go into a wall like that and maybe place them into a part that's not sloping so much. So that's a lot better. But you know, it's a great, even though it's not perfect, it's a great option for creating complex geometry that just wasn't an option before in any BIM program, and still all the other BIM programs like ArchiCAD and even Vectorworks don't have any options for modelling this level of complexity. So Revit's really the only BIM program that has this sort of organic modelling as an option. No, it's a fairly new feature. Yeah, since I think about release 2013 or so. Oh yes, I better just show you quickly how to make changes. So the mass is still there. If I use Tab, I can select it and then go to Edit Family, and then just make a simple change. So maybe I'll bring one of those surfaces out to one side. I've made a change that's going to affect a lot of surfaces actually. Save it, load into project, and override existing version. So I can see then the mass has changed, but the objects haven't. So you need to then select each object that you want to update and use update to face. And it's because you don't always want everything to change that you need to let it know. So there, that's made all the walls change, but the floors, just go to wireframe so I can see them, and I'll just select them as a group, and again update to face. Okay, so again, really powerful modelling option you have with Revit. So I might just get rid of some of those windows, and then I'll do a quick link into the other really powerful option that Autodesk give you, which is to use 3ds Max as a rendering program, and also maybe to do more complex modelling as well. So I'll just save this. Okay, so I'm going to need a ground surface. I'll just quickly put that in. And for your projects, oh sorry, I do have it, it was just hidden. So for your projects, I think I showed you this before, you can just do a flat ground surface under the building. You don't need to have the detail or show a slope at all. You can if you want to, but it's not required. And then, oh sorry, there it is. So we just want to make sure the building's anchored onto something. And I'm just going to turn shadows on to see that yes, it is touching the ground. And so then I'm going to make a camera view in that quadrangle. Oh, no, just blocks B and C. Yep. Okay, so to go into 3ds Max, you should always make a 3D view, and it's best to have a camera view to do that. So that's what I've got here, but I think it might look better from the other side. Just do that again. Okay, so obviously that form could do with a lot more work, but I'll just bring it in as it is. And so we've got the sun to think about as well. I'm just going to go to sun settings there, and then make sure it's on still, and then turn the shadows on, and I might just go back into sun settings and turn off the ground plane because I've modelled the ground, and just get a sun angle that's better. Maybe if I go for summer sun. Yep, so that's alright. And then again, I'm just going to save the file and open up 3ds Max. So in here we've got 3ds Max Design installed. So while that's opening, I'll just show you on the main menu, you've got really two options using the suite workflows. You've got 3ds Max Design Exterior Rendering and 3ds Max Design Interior Rendering. And really the main difference is that the lights are turned off in a and disabled in an exterior rendering, but with the interior rendering it includes them, and the sun comes through with either, so you can use interior rendering most of the time. And actually, just while Max is opening up, Showcase is a great option as well because it's really quick. So for real-time walkthroughs and things like that, it's another really good program. But I don't think we've got Showcase installed here. Good, okay, so that's why it's taking a little while. Okay, and also just while that's opening, I'll do a quick render here. And now if that happens, if it goes black, do you know what the problem usually is? Exactly. So you can always check it by just going into a plan view and right click on the view name, which is in this case going to be 3D View 5, show camera, and there we are. You can see it's right on the wall. So I can bring that across to the left and then go back to the view and render again. Okay, so it's rendering reasonably well, but I'll show you in a moment. We can do a lot more with 3ds Max. So here I'm going to start a new project just by going to create a new scene. And then on the customize menu, I'm going to go to unit setup and set the display units to metric and millimeters. And well, there's an option that a lot of people use in the system unit setup, and that's to set the system units to centimeters for that's European, sorry, for Revit to feet actually is a common option people use just for Revit files. So normally you want that on inches, but it can help with Revit files to put that to feet. I'm not going to do that. It's only if you're going to do a lot of detailed work on a Revit file in 3ds Max. So the main option again is just to set the display units. And then back in Revit, I can go now to the main menu, Suite Workflows, 3ds Max Design Interior Rendering is the one I'm going to use, because I've got lights that I want to bring through. I've only got a few at the moment, because I'm going to add more later, and I want them to come through later as well. So I'm just going to keep using interior rendering throughout. So there, I don't need to change any settings, I'm just going to use Run. And then choose the option from the list here, Active 3ds Max Session, and choose that file that's already been created in 3ds Max. Okay, so we'll see then it brings the whole model in. That's important to notice. So remember, I exported from a camera view, which is something you have to do. That's like a container that that this file is using, but it does bring the entire model and all the geometry. So I'm going to use this shortcut C to set that camera view into this viewport. And then in the bottom right corner, use the minimize maximize toggle to bring that viewport down to the corner and bring out the other 4 viewports. And that way you can look at those other views, and to switch between views you right click into different viewports. And so now I want to see the sun the same way I did in Revit. So I'm going to right click into the camera view, and then right clicking where it says shaded, I can go to realistic, and then I'll right click there again and go to lighting and shadows, and then illuminate with scene lights. So now it's using the same sun as Revit. Then I'm going to select the sun, which you'll see if you zoom out in the plan view is this thing that looks like a sun up the top there. And then in the modify panel I'm going to check that it's active, and also that the skylight is active. And well, actually that's almost enough to do a quick render for you, because I don't want to spend too long on this tonight. So I'm going to go and bring up the rendering dialog box, which is on the main toolbar. Towards the end you'll see 3 buttons that are all to do with rendering. So it's the first one that has a teapot on it, the first of those 3. It brings up the render dialog box. So there you have basic options for things like the pixel dimensions, which is effectively your resolution. So I'll go to say 800 by 600. And also things like global illumination, which is something that you get in Revit, but in a much more simplified form. So I'll just show you quickly in Revit, in the render dialog box there, when you go to the custom option, also just choose edit from that list, and that essentially lets you change the custom settings. You'll see there are options for things like indirect illumination. But notice you've got basically 3 sliders there, and that's it. And also options for daylight portals, which are related. So that's quite limited. To do or to get a lot more control over your bounce lighting, you need these other options that 3ds Max gives you. And so this is the same basic tool, but you have a lot more options in Revit. You've got final gather, and then the other option is global illumination, which has been disabled. I'm going to enable it, but I'll render first. I'm just going to leave this dialog box open. So you'll see at the top it's got final gather turned on, which is what you have in Revit in a more automatic way. And then back under rendering, I'm going to go to another option, exposure control. So that's again an option you have in Revit. When you click on adjust exposure, you get a few sliders there, but again in 3ds Max you have a lot more options, and you get true photographic exposure control. So there, I'm just going to click render preview to get some idea of the exposure level. It's probably pretty close to what you'd want at first because it's on 15, which is the setting you'd normally have for an outdoor render. If I reduce that exposure value, it's going to get progressively brighter and brighter. And so for an interior render, you would have it down much lower. So yeah, I'll just leave it on that for now, but that's a really important one, especially for interior renders. You'll always need to adjust that exposure value in 3ds Max. And so I'll just then go into the render dialog box and click render. And you can see then it's rendering the scene a lot faster than Revit, and already better quality, even though this is just a draft render for 3ds Max. Because it doesn't have the overhead. It's the same rendering engine as Revit uses actually, but it just isn't set up to do all the other view types that Revit does, like plans and sections and elevations, and also all the management side of Revit, which just isn't necessary in a program like 3ds Max, which is pure 3D. Yeah, exactly, and to add detail. So you can still keep modelling in 3ds Max and add in, you know, the detailed furniture and things like that is too much work in Revit. Alright, so it's slowing down a bit over here, but I might just cancel this and just show you one little thing with the materials. So on the main tab there, you have the button that looks like a sphere with a dialog box on top of it, and that's your material editor. So again, it uses the same materials as Revit does, but you get a lot more control. So with the modes menu there, you can go to the compact editor, because this one is the node-based editor, which is much more complex, and if you haven't used 3ds Max for years, is very difficult. So I'll go to compact instead, and you can see then it changes the interface to one that's a little bit more user-friendly. Close all of this. So I'll use the eyedropper there. I'm going to pick that material from this surface, just to show you a little bit about materials in 3ds Max. I'll show you lighting later, because lighting's a bit more involved. So it's giving me there the wall paint material. And honestly, the more time you spend with things like this in Revit, the easier it'll be in a program like 3ds Max. So just to remind you, when you work in Revit with your materials, you go to Materials on the Manage tab. Let's check that name again. What was it? Finish? Yeah, of course, Finish. Okay, so Finish is one of those common default materials you have in Revit. And notice then on the Appearance tab, it's giving the properties for wall paint. And so that's one of the preset templates you have for materials in Mental Ray. And it carries across from Revit to 3ds Max. So if you're already familiar with that template in Revit, it's again much easier when you go into 3ds Max. Looking just quickly at some of these other materials, like the roof there is a metal material. So again, those properties that you have available in Revit, you'll also have in 3ds Max. So looking at that same finished material, it's got those same properties that Revit gives us, but then a few more. So ambient occlusion is a nice one that Revit doesn't give you, and adds a lot of realism. The colour there I can still access in the same way I do in Revit, so I could make that a different colour really easily. The finish, again, you have exactly the same options as Revit gives you. And then you can go even further and add this other option, round corners, which is a nice easy one to add in, kind of a cheating way of putting extra detail onto the geometry. So it's like you're filleting the corners without actually changing any of the surfaces. So if I render again now, it'll give me that, that new material. So you've always got that option. You can do the basic setup of the materials in Revit and then take them further in 3ds Max. So that's too dark. I might just make that lighter. So notice also that you have the same options for colours, but again, it goes a little bit further and gives you things like alpha, and also you can adjust in a more detailed way the colours. That range is actually a lot higher than what you have in Revit. So that's a bit too light actually. Also, just a little thing, it's a good way of really learning your primary colours, because if you're taught with red, yellow, blue, it's a bit confusing because they're not the real primaries, of course. They're just an approximation. But here, you'll see as you adjust these sliders, red, green and blue are the true primaries for light, it shows you what you get. So if you add more green, we're going to go closer to yellow there. If we add more blue, we're going to go closer to pink. And I don't know, I had a lot of issues when I learnt the primaries by being taught painting and being taught red, yellow, blue by artists who still think of red, yellow, blue as the primaries. And there are lots of colours you just can't make because they're not the primaries. And cyan, magenta, yellow is what they should be using, but they're too expensive to buy as paints, and so that's why they still teach you with red, yellow and blue. So that's how I truly learnt colour theory, was using these programs, and I've taught colour theory in other places because of that. So notice though that my walls over here have changed colour as well because they were using that same finished material, so you've got to watch out for that. Oh yes, of course, yeah. So I could just give a different material to that, and that's a simple thing. So yeah, you can reassign materials, so I'll just maybe quickly do that, and I might leave it there. So I'll just cancel this render, and yeah, so a simple way of making those materials different would be to copy this material. So I'm going to drag it down, drag it down to another slot, and I'll call it Finish Red. And then go back to the original one, change it back to that off-white colour, or even just full white might do. And then the finished red material, I'll select the things I want to assign it to. So I'll just go to another view actually to get those, and make that one shaded as well. So just with that wall selected now, I can use this button here to assign a new material. I can select each of those surfaces and just manually assign that material. So that's like your paint tool in Revit. There we go. So a lot of it's fairly intuitive, but and you know, a lot of people in some of the uni courses that I'm doing do use this program when they're working as students to do their work. But they put a lot of time in as well to learn it. It's getting better and better though. It's not as daunting as it used to be to learn, and because you've got that linked workflow from Revit now, you can do a lot of the initial work in Revit and then just finish things off in Max. And even without doing very much, it should render better than Revit will. So if you're not getting the cloud to work, it's often a good option rather than using Revit. And animation, if you're interested in doing animation, it's by far the best. Revit's very limited for animation. Okay, so I might just finish that video there anyway. I just want to give you an idea about those options, and I'll maybe give you some examples on lighting with 3ds Max next week. And I want to do lighting in Revit as well, of course, and go a lot further with that. So I won't wait for that to finish rendering. Hopefully you've got the idea there.